Hello everyone. Welcome to your own YouTube channel ATP for Learning. Today we will learn or instead explore a topic that is synonymous with our own channel, which is ATP. ATP is also considered the energy currency of the cells. It is due to ATP mitochondria is known as the powerhouse of the cell. The term ATP stands for adenosine triphosphate. You will be wondered to find out that without ATP, we couldn't form a thought or move a muscle. ATP keeps our nerves firing and our hearts beating. As I told you earlier, it's our body's energy currency. It's the main energy currency not only in our cells but in all forms of life on the planet. All cells make ATP. In other words, ATP doesn't travel from cell to cell, and they use ATP to power nearly all of their processes. As shown in the figure, there are multiple ways to show ATP by using a 3D model based on molecular structure, a 2D model by highlighting atoms, or simplified 2D models. ATP holds a tremendous amount of energy. ATP is like a tiny battery that can power many molecular processes. As shown in the figure, a rechargeable AA battery is a package of energy that can power any number of electronic devices, a remote control, a flashlight, or a game controller. Similarly, a molecule of ATP holds a little bit of chemical energy and can power something within the cell. This single molecule can power a motor protein that makes a muscle cell contract, a transport protein that makes a nerve cell fire, a ribosome that is the molecular machine that can build these and other proteins, and much more. ATP is often called the cell's energy currency. Like money can buy any item in a store, this one molecule can power almost any process in a cell. The best part of ATP is that it is recyclable. The cell doesn't have to make ATP from scratch every time it needs some energy. Like a rechargeable battery, ATP can also be recharged and reused. ADP, the uncharged version of the molecule, stands for adenosine diphosphate. The word diphosphate indicates that the molecule has two phosphate or PO3 groups. To charge ADP, the cell adds a third phosphate group, converting ADP to ADP. ADP stands for adenosine triphosphate. The word triphosphate indicates that the molecule has three phosphate groups. ADP stores energy within the bonds between phosphate groups, especially the second and third. This bond is a source of potential chemical energy, and it's kind of like a compressed spring. Getting the energy back out requires a protein or, in some cases, RNA that number 1, breaks the third phosphate group off and number 2, uses the energy released, like when a spring uncoils, to do something, drive a chemical reaction, move part of the protein, or transport something. As shown in the figure, the ADP portion of the molecule stays the same. Adding a third phosphate group, also known as phosphorylation, adds energy, like compressing a spring. Removing the phosphate group, also known as hydrolysis, releases energy, like freeing a spring to uncoil. The cell can make and break ADP exceptionally quickly. You will be surprised to find out that a working muscle cell makes and uses about 10 million molecules of ADP every second. Isn't it amazing? There are three major uses of ADP, namely, chemical, mechanical, and transport. We will learn each of these one by one. Starting with chemical use. Energy from ADP is used to fuel all manner of chemical reactions, including those required for copying DNA and building proteins. In these reactions, enzymes oversee the transfer of energy from ADP hydrolysis to the formation of another chemical bond. As I told you earlier, the work that ADP does falls into three general categories: chemical, mechanical, and transport. In other words, the energy from ADP can be used to drive a chemical reaction, move something, or push a molecule from one side of a membrane to another. The most significant users of ADP are shown in the figure, in which an enzyme tRNA synthetase uses ADP to charge a tRNA molecule, attaching an amino acid that will be used for building a protein. Most of our cells steadily make proteins and carry out other repairs as part of their routine maintenance. Some cells, like the ones that make up our skin and the lining of our digestive tract, are actively dividing to replace cells that are lost every day. DNA replication and protein synthesis are exceptionally high in these cells. The second major use of ADP is in mechanical use. ADP powers the motor, proteins that do the small-scale work of shuttling cargo around inside of cells, as well as the large-scale work of making our muscles contract. The molecular details of muscle contraction are shown in the figure, in which the motor proteins are one shape when bound to ADP. Hydrolysis of ADP to ADP causes a conformational change, the protein changes shape. That generates a mechanical force. Motor proteins that carry tiny packets of cargo literally walk along the cell's cytoskeleton, breaking one molecule of ADP with every step. To move our muscles, many thousands of motor proteins, myosin, work together, breaking many molecules of ADP at a time to generate a remarkable amount of force. The third and last major use of ADP is in transportation. ADP-powered pumps in brain cells are the human body's biggest energy users, at least when we're at rest. These molecular pumps set up the electrochemical gradients that enable neurons to communicate with one another. The sole job of pump proteins is to move molecules from one side of a cell's membrane to another against their concentration gradients. There are different kinds of pumps, each of which moves specific ions, such as sodium or Na+, potassium or K+, or protons or H+. A calcium or Ca++ pump is shown in the figure. Some kinds of pumps can move other types of small molecules. Now the question may come to your mind, how can we make this energy currency? The answer to this question is that there are two ways to make ADP. One is substrate-level phosphorylation, and another is oxidative phosphorylation. But plants have a third way in which they use sunlight to make ADP. But in today's session, we will learn the first two ways. As our cells oxidize carbon-based molecules from our food, some of the energy held within the chemical bonds is released. Our complex metabolic system is arranged to capture and put some of this energy to work. If ADP is like a battery, then cellular respiration is like a battery charger. As I told you earlier, our cells have two ways to make ADP: substrate-level phosphorylation and oxidative phosphorylation. Plants have a third. During photosynthesis, they use energy from sunlight to make ADP. The substrate-level phosphorylation process involves an enzyme, which is a type of protein that transfers a phosphate group from a substrate, in this case, a carbon-based molecule from food to ADP, as shown in the figure. The ADP generated during glycolysis and the citric acid cycle come about in this way, accounting for 4 ADPs per glucose molecule. While the oxidative phosphorylation process generates most of the ADP, we use up to 27 for each molecule of glucose. As enzymes break apart the molecules from food, they transfer hydrogen atoms that are made of a proton and an electron to the carrier molecules FAD and NAD. These carriers molecule deliver these protons and electrons to the mitochondrial membrane. As shown in the figure, the movement of electrons along the electron transport chain powers pumps that move protons into the space between the two mitochondrial membranes. The protons then diffuse back across the membrane through ADP synthase, a remarkable molecular machine that uses the energy from proton diffusion to charge molecules of ADP. At last, you will be amazed to find out that ADP serves as a dual-purpose molecule. That is, it is not only the energy currency, but ADP is also a nucleotide. In other words, ADP not only stores energy, it is one of the building blocks of RNA, along with UTP, CTP, and GTP. Molecular machines inside all cells, called RNA polymerases, link these building blocks together into long chains to make messenger, transfer, ribosomal, and other types of RNA. Each nucleotide holds the energy needed to add itself to the growing chain. As RNA is being built in a process called transcription, 2 phosphates are cleaved off the incoming nucleotide, and the energy from that bond is redirected into forming a new bond with the nucleotide in front of it. DNA is built using a similar process, only the building blocks are DATP, DTTP, DCTP, and DGTP. The D indicates that the nucleotides contain the sugar deoxyribose instead of ribose. The difference is that deoxyribose has one less oxygen atom. Like ADP, GTP can also be used to hold and transfer energy. During the citric acid cycle, for example, GTP acts as an intermediate energy holder, ultimately transferring its third phosphate group to ADP to generate ADP. GTP also powers some of the steps of protein synthesis. Thank you for joining me on this amazing journey of learning. We will again meet with new innovative topics. Meanwhile, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and comment.